So, and you get complaints in the religious sector, you get them. We had an interview with an old religious leader. He was sort of sad about it, and he said, I didn't go into this business to be an events coordinator. But what he is now is an events coordinator. And you get another sad story, unless you have a sense of humor, but in the Central Valley of California, an old doctor had created a program for medical care for migrant workers that was very successful. But he told our interviewers that, and he was a well-known doctor, he told the interviewer that he had to give it up. He said, this is too difficult, we need a real professional. And, you know, we thought he was a professional. But he understood, no, he's not a modern professional anymore. He doesn't have MBA. And he needs MBA to do the work. You can sentimentally prefer the good old days, but my point here is that you report on this massive social change in which you have tremendous expansion in the capacity to organize legitimately. So this chart, and there are a number of others published by these people, Ho-Kyu Huang and Jeanette Colivas, just show at the theoretical side, in the academic world, what we now call people, we don't call them people anymore, we call them actors. And we don't call them organizations or interest groups anymore, we call them actors. And that's a kind of social promotion. After all, they've been to the university, and we moved them up. And they're not people anymore. They're not human beings. That stopped up 200 years ago. They became citizens, and the peasants became. And now we promote them one more step. And they are actors. They have charts like this. These are the proportion of articles in 3 leading journals that use the word actor. And it wasn't used until after the war in the 60s. And then it takes off. They have other charts for other social science groups. It's a picture of a much more empowered entity and a much more rationalized one. So I guess that represents a change in the conception of people and their capacity to organize. And now we come to this capacity, which increases over time. They have become actors, they are empowered. They are linked up to a knowledge system that is rationalized and universal. So that my students, when they had studied history, they were in poor position to give instruction. I mean, history was particular to particular civilizations in national contexts. Now they major in economics or sociology, and they can give policy advice anywhere in the world to countries they could not find on a map. And they will give policy advice to countries that don't exist also. I have done experiments. They possess a universalistic knowledge which they share with the other educated people. So the capacity for collective action goes way up, much of which takes the form of organization. So you get the expansion of formal organization in every sector, government, nonprofit, profit, in every kind of country. It's worldwide. It's hard to get data for specific countries, but whenever you can, you get the same growth in organization. So, just anecdotally, I worked on projects in Southern Africa, 1990s. And somebody connected to the World Bank or something did a survey in Uganda, and they found 4,000 nonprofit organizations registered. Many of them would have just dead letters, but a lot of them exist, if you can call organizations as existing. Years later, I worked in the Republic of Georgia, where these things would have been prohibited by and large in 10 years before, 15 years before. And again, 3,500 of them. It was the capacity to create these enterprises. And it's almost all educated people doing it. They're schooled in a common global culture. They are schooled to be empowered as actors and to easily engage in collective action. So, you get a worldwide expansion in participation. Some of it can be supranational because the culture is involved. The school culture is itself a supranational enterprise. The university curricula, the ideologies everywhere are very similar. So the capacity to create structures beyond national boundaries goes up dramatically. And this chart just shows that for the American case, the extreme degree at which these are all professionals. And you see the white bars are the professions in 2000, and black bars are the professions in 100 years earlier, 90 years earlier. And we used to have a society in which people did actual work. And then now there are people like us, who we call ourselves as in the labor market, where we die rather than do labor. And what we do is we engage in organized activity. I just wanted to show how that chart would describe not only the developed world, but changes in the same direction occur in the developing world also. Much less, but the change, the rates of change are the same. The production of huge categories of professional people capable of participating in and creating organizations. Then I want to take a break here just because I think it's important coming to SCORE where people are a little pure about the use of numbers in social research. And although I think almost SCORE people allow your article to have page numbers, but anything beyond that is hard. And I wanted to just show a series of analyses that we're doing, what it means that tertiary education expands. And the crucial variable here, the independent variable, is tertiary enrollment, characteristic of countries, over in fixed effects models over a 30 or 40-year period, since about 1970. And the only row, the dependent variables are at the top, and the charts I'm going to show you have equation after equation with different dependent variables, and always the thing of interest is the effect of tertiary, the size of the university system in a country. And you observe, when you get more university enrollment, you get more professional associations. You get more civil society organizations. There's a directory, there's a lot of error in these kinds of data, but there's a directory that tries to keep track of them. And you get the rationalization of the public sector. So in each case, significant effect. As the public sector turns into transparent or nominally transparent organizations. The point to show is how consistent those effects are. Lowering corruption, increasing rated bureaucratic efficiency. I'm going to show a lot of these equations. You can't take any one very seriously because the data are always problematic. But it's very consistent over time. Okay? Yeah, you turn all these people into schooled, rationalized actors, and they can participate in a rationalized organization, and they can create them. And they do. So here's another set of dependent variables. They link up and look only at the tertiary role, and they link up to the international system Because remember, they're schooled. They're no longer schooled, and they've been removed from family and community for a long time and organized for dozens of years in state-sponsored prison or universities. And in this fashion, they have become actors. And they share their actorhood with other people so they can participate in ingos, environmental ingos, women's ingos. Also tourism goes up, trade goes up, foreign direct investment goes up. Rationalized world. Another chart. Again, they form environmental groups. And two measures of actual environmental quality are improved. The air gets a little better, and the forests, deforestation slows down. And they form organizations, and they celebrate human rights. In each case, we're holding constant the variables listed on the left side, and also sometimes other variables you need to hold constant. The point is to get a common format. And then the final thing I want to show, a bit of background. All through the history of the university, reasonable people have been critical of it as a waste of time and of social status. And efforts were made to kill it off. Napoleon was successful for one century in sort of killing it off and creating more reasonable training arrangements. At the beginning of our period, in 1945 or 50 or 55, the intellectual consensus was strong that if you want to have economic and social development in a country, you can't allow universities to expand. They deflect attention into ridiculous areas, economics, sociology, and they take people away from work, they take attention away from work. So they are inefficient, they are corrupting, and a left-wing point of view, they undercut class solidarity, and that was a consensus. So, many books. Richard Freeman, The Overeducated American. Even Illich, Deschooling Society. Ivor Berg, The Great Training Robbery. Cute. And serious books by Raymond Boudon, and the consensus as most responsible, Joseph Ben David and Avram Zaka, with our an analysis that the university expansion was a very bad thing from the point of view of development, and any country that had a respectable state would stop it. Or keep it limited to the actual needs you had for people who could read and write and things. By now, it's all changed. And what's changed, now everybody talks about the knowledge society, and everybody imagines that's a kind of progress. And what's changed is the accounting system. We now count. The people in this room would have been counted as a drag on progress in 1950, and I think in some cases it's justified. Speaking myself at least. And now it counts. The expenditures we make, our salaries, and everything count. It's called the service sector. And it's the most rapidly expanding sector. And all kinds of people who do nothing get counted. So here's an analysis of economic growth. The first column is just GDP per capita, holding constant earlier GDP per capita. And of course it's affected famously by investment. Then by secondary school enrollment. That's always been seen as training good workers. It's not been critical. And tertiary enrollment has positive effect. It didn't used to, but it does now. And my point is it's partly because of a changed accounting system. And then we have the log of earlier GDP per capita, which is just a control variable. Where does the growth occur? And I show you now in the next 3 or 4 columns the percent of the GDP that occurs in various categories and the effect of tertiary education on that. And of course, expanded tertiary education produces a massive increase in the now accounted GDP of the service sector. and takes away proportionately, although not absolutely, from industrial or manufacturing production. You see those minus signs there in agricultural production. And indeed, yeah, the expansion of our educated and organized world produces progress because we count ourselves as part of progress. It's very strange. It's more strange if you think about your colleagues. Well, this produces, and I'll show you charts that have been published, and go just to remind you that the biggest expansion of the capacity to organize occurs in the supranational level. And here, a count of the non-governmental organizations. And again, exploding after 1950. People can do something that would have been seen very difficult in an earlier period when they were thought to be linked to community and national context. Now they form these things in the thousands. But I've shown, I'll move quickly here. Same thing with intergovernmental associations. It used to be difficult. Now it's routine. They can do that. And similarly with economic organizations, here on a different scale, are the numbers of multinationals. Trade hasn't increased. International trade hasn't increased in that way. What's changed is the capacity to readily form tens of thousands of international organizations. When I first studied organization, we understood at a special category how difficult it was to have an international one. Cultures are different. Indonesia, they don't like you to point at them, and in Mexico, something else. So great difficulties. This is all gone. Everybody's been to the same universities or the same business schools, and they can easily form associations, and they do, organizing on a supranational scale. This is associated, of course, with an enormous expansion of, in all these areas, of professionalized people who then operate as we do, as the leeches on this system, sucking a little blood out of it when we're successful. And you get the rise, just for example, in the business world, of all kinds of corporate social responsibility initiatives. And in addition, I could show you charts, but I do not have time here. There are enormous numbers of consultants will help you get higher ratings. And that's people like us again, right? You know how to do that. We found a directory of consultants that will help you get CSR to score in the CSR front. It had 5,000 entrants in it. So this is enormous expansion. And of course associated with it, the expansion of training programs to not just to be an MBA, but to be a properly certified MBA who's had 5 courses in corporate social responsibility. And so you get this enormous industry around the citizenship of these actors. Well, this system generates, and it's well known in the literature, I'm just sort of summarizing, this expansion of organization produces an expansion far beyond the narrow functions that were assumed by a classic bureaucracy, industrial or political. Now you have all those staff structures that expand as organizations become citizens of a global society. Huge expansions of structures, very difficult to relate to the purposes of the firm or the university or the state. An enormous expansion of collateral functions, we call in our book hyper-organization, where by reason of law or public opinion, you hire people people like us, who will do no good for the accomplishment of the enterprise, but who protect the enterprise on more and more dimensions as the organization becomes an actor. So you get this huge addition of poorly related functional structures inside a modern firm or university or hospital, and held together because it is, again, legally required or socially required, or maybe the organization wants to protect itself from criticism. And you get elaborate structures held together, sometimes by legal requirements, by accounting systems that treat the expenditures on these collateral activities as functional without evidence that they have any effect. And so the accounting scheme looks okay because we treat the people like us as if we were reasonable investments. And the accounting system holds that together, the legal system holds that together, and above all other things, two changes are facilitated by the expansion of higher education. You get the enormous rise, not of imperative authority, but of management. The imperative authority dies in 1950, and now it's replaced by coordination and management. In other words, people who bring a professional skill to decision making, not an exercise of their own will. And higher education also permits us to hire, say, a human relations or human resources specialist by providing credentials of various kinds. So in both cases we have massive professionalization, and that produces pseudo-functional relations held together and justified by accounting systems without much evidence that it really works. So by hyperorganization we mean the addition to the firm or any other prize of this sort of structure. So to show you examples of what happens, I mean, in the university we complain about this all the time, but also from these two people we have, I took from their paper a list of all the C blank O's: Chief Executive Officer, Chief Operating Officer, Chief Finance Officer, Chief Diversity Officer. Right? There's a list of all these things that I just took it out of their paper, all the ones that they have noticed empirically. In other words, we establish the kind of professional authority of all these people in all these functional areas. And what holds them together? Management. Whatever that means. Okay. And I'll show you just one other example of the same kind, this from my own university, which is, as you may know, richer than a university should be. And here are the people who report to the provost of Stanford University. Right? So this is not your old bureaucratic structure. This is a massive set of people, and there's no reason why a provost, even if he were intelligent, would be able to, in fact, coordinate the activities involved, right? It was way beyond that. And that's what we mean by hyperorganization. Many of these people very poorly relate to the teaching and research functions of the university. Now, if I got a less rich university, it would be less expanded, but it would be in the same scale. Well, the last point I want to leave you with is, of course, all this rests very heavily on external legitimations. There's no reason, if you took every second one of these people and took him out and shot him, would the university be worse off in terms of teaching and research? Well, probably not. And my colleague, when I brought this up, said, well, it depends which half you. But I think that's not fair. The point is, all of it depends on external legitimation, and I leave you with the following general point. If we move now in a less neoliberal world, in which all those external assumptions are less validated, have less authority, are less convincing, what happens to all this stuff? That is, it's obvious you don't go back to 1950, but it's not obvious to me where you do go. If you have modern organizational structures with massive numbers of roles that are functionally integrated only by virtue of the external mythologies involved, what happens and where do they go? To pick my own university, when I went there was no human resources office. There was a payroll department where you hired somebody from the street and you sent them to payroll and they signed up and got paid. That was it. Now it's a huge establishment. And I must tell you that in 1975 or 70, when the new rules came into place, and I have an excitable psychiatric colleague. He's a professional, I'm not a patient. And when he discovered he couldn't hire his own secretary anymore, he got infuriated, and he told me he was going to move to New Zealand. He thought. He didn't, in fact, go. He went to Los Angeles. But these are dramatic changes. And then the question is, now what happens if the legal and cultural supports weaken, and what direction does it go? And I repeat that it's foolish to imagine it goes back. But where is forward? That's what I think about these days. I don't have very much useful to say about it. But it does seem like a serious question. When this binge of neoliberal culture, which intensified that whole period since 1950 with this dramatic episodes of the last 20 or 30 years. Now that comes under criticism, and I wonder what comes next. Let me stop there. Thank you.